Captain Sarah Matthews sat alone at the back corner table of Murphy's Diner, her coffee growing cold between her calloused hands. Outside the window, the small town of Riverside, Pennsylvania looked exactly as it had when she left 12 years ago. Same brick buildings, same faded American flags hanging from the lampposts, same people with the same doubts in their eyes. She was 42 now. Her dark hair was cut short and practical. Her face carried lines that didn't come from laughter. When she moved, there was a preciseness to it, a controlled economy of motion that marked her as someone who had lived in dangerous places. Sarah had returned home 3 months ago, after her medical discharge from the Army. 20 years of service, 3 combat tours, a Silver Star gathering dust in a drawer somewhere, and not a single person in this town who believed a word she said. It started at the hardware store 2 weeks after she got back. Old Mr. Peterson was behind the counter, same as always. Sarah was buying supplies to fix her late father's porch when Peterson's grandson, Kyle, a kid barely 20 with an oversized ego, made a comment. "My grandpa says you were just a paper pusher over there," Kyle said, loud enough for the other customers to hear. "Says women don't see real combat." Sarah had looked at him calmly. "I was special operations. I saw plenty." Kyle laughed. "Right, and I'm a Navy SEAL." She didn't argue. She paid for her nails and screws and left, but the seed was planted. Then it was the VFW Hall. Sarah went there on a Thursday night hoping to connect with other veterans. She walked into a room full of men, Korean War vets, Vietnam vets, a handful from Desert Storm. They were polite at first. Respectful even, until she mentioned her deployment to Afghanistan, until she mentioned the missions. "I was part of a task force," Sarah said quietly, nursing a beer she didn't really want. "We did direct action raids, hostage rescue, high-value target capture." A man named Frank Dixon, 65 and proud of his 2 tours in Vietnam, raised an eyebrow. "Hostage rescue? What unit were you with?" "I can't say the designation," Sarah replied. "A lot of it's still classified," Frank snorted. "Classified, right." He turned to his buddies. "Sounds like someone's been watching too many movies." The other men chuckled. Not meanly exactly, but enough to make Sarah's jaw tighten. "I'm telling the truth," she said evenly. "Sure you are, honey," Frank said, turning back to his drink. "Sure you are." Sarah left early that night. She didn't go back, but the worst came at the town council meeting. Riverside was putting together a Veterans Day ceremony, and Sarah, foolishly, thought she might contribute. Maybe share a few words. Maybe represent the newer generation of veterans. The ones who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan while America went about its daily business, half forgetting there was even a war on. Councilman Barrett, a puffed-up man in his 50s who'd never served a day in his life, listened to her offer with barely concealed amusement. "We appreciate your service, Miss Matthews," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "but we're looking for veterans with significant combat experience. Real stories, you understand. The kind that inspire people." "I have those stories," Sarah said, keeping her voice level even as heat crept up her neck. Barrett smiled thinly. "I'm sure you have stories, but we've done some asking around. Seems like there's some confusion about what exactly you did over there. We need speakers with verified documented heroism, not," he waved his hand vaguely, "exaggerations." The word hit her like a slap. "I'm not exaggerating anything," Sarah said, her voice harder now. "Well, the problem is, Captain," Barrett said, leaning back in his chair, "nobody can seem to confirm these missions you talk about. These hostage rescues, these secret operations, it all sounds very Hollywood, very unlikely for someone like you." Someone like you, a woman, he meant. A woman couldn't have done the things Sarah said she did. Sarah stood up slowly. "I have a Silver Star." "Lots of people get medals," Barrett said dismissively. "Doesn't mean you were kicking down doors and saving lives." "We'll go with Sergeant Moreno for the speech. He was a helicopter mechanic in Iraq. Good, honest service. Believable." Sarah walked out of that meeting with her fists clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. That night, alone in her childhood home, she pulled out the old shoebox from the top of her closet. Inside were the things she couldn't talk about. Photos she wasn't supposed to have, faces of teammates she'd lost, a patch from a unit that didn't officially exist, and a small worn piece of fabric, a purple scarf with yellow flowers. Sarah held the scarf gently, the way you'd hold something sacred. Her mind drifted back. Back to the mountains. Back to the compound. Back to the woman. It was 2019. The mission brief had been simple on paper. Intelligence suggested an American aid worker was being held by a Taliban splinter group in a compound near the Pakistan border. The woman had been missing for 8 months. The brass had almost given up, but Sarah's team never gave up. She remembered the helicopter ride in, the cold night air, the way her heart had hammered in her chest, the way it always did before they hit a target. She remembered the explosion as they breached the door, the gunfire, the screaming, the chaos, and she remembered finding her. The woman had been in a basement room chained to a pipe, barely alive. She was thin, so thin Sarah could see every bone. Her eyes were hollow with trauma and terror. "It's okay," Sarah had whispered, cutting through the chains with bolt cutters. "You're safe now. I've got you. We're taking you home," the woman had sobbed, clutched Sarah's arm, whispered thank you over and over. They'd extracted under fire. Sarah had carried the woman half a mile to the extraction point while bullets tore up the ground around them. One of Sarah's teammates, Rodriguez, had taken a round covering their escape. He'd survived barely. The woman went home. The mission was classified. Sarah received her Silver Star in a closed ceremony with no family present. No press, no record that would ever be made public. And now, years later, nobody believed it had happened at all. Sarah put the scarf back in the box. She was tired. Tired of defending herself. Tired of the looks. Tired of being called a liar in her own hometown. Maybe she'd just stay quiet, fade into the background, let them think what they wanted. But then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Captain Matthews, this is Colonel Briggs. I need you to come to the VFW hall tomorrow at 1500 hours. It's important. Please don't ask questions yet. Just come." Sarah stared at the message, her heart suddenly pounding. Colonel Briggs had been her commanding officer. He'd been at her side on that mission in 2019. What could he possibly want? Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Colonel Briggs wanted. He'd been her mentor, her advocate, the man who'd recommended her for special operations when everyone else said a woman couldn't handle it. But they hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since her medical discharge after a training accident had destroyed the ligaments in her left knee. The surgery had been successful, but the Army's standards were unforgiving. She could walk, even jog, but she couldn't pass the physical requirements anymore. So they'd thanked her for her service and sent her home. At 14:45 the next afternoon, Sarah pulled her old Ford pickup into the VFW hall parking lot. The building was a squat brick structure with a faded mural of an eagle painted on one side. A handful of cars sat in the lot, including one she didn't recognize, a black SUV with government plates. Her instincts, honed by years of operations, prickled at the back of her neck. Something was happening. She walked inside. The main room was empty except for 3 men standing near the bar. Colonel Briggs, now retired but still carrying himself like he owned every room he entered, turned when she walked in. He was 60, gray-haired, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Next to him stood a man in a suit, late 40s, FBI or maybe State Department written all over him, and Frank Dixon, the Vietnam vet who'd mocked her 2 weeks ago. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Colonel." "Captain Matthews," Briggs said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, familiar. "Thank you for coming. You said it was important." "It is." Briggs gestured to the man in the suit. "This is Agent Robert Chen, FBI. He's been working a case that involves you indirectly." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What case?" Chen stepped forward. He had a tablet in his hands. "Captain Matthews, I'm going to be direct. We've been tracking a domestic extremist group operating in Pennsylvania and Ohio. 3 weeks ago, we received credible intelligence that they're planning an attack on the Veterans Day ceremony here in Riverside." Sarah's blood went cold. "What kind of attack?" "They want to make a statement," Chen said grimly. "Anti-government, anti-military. They see the ceremony as a symbol of what they hate. We've been monitoring their communications, but we don't have enough yet to make arrests. We need eyes on the ground. Someone who knows tactics. Someone who can blend in." "You want me to help," Sarah said. "We want you to consult," Briggs corrected. "Your expertise could save lives, Sarah." She glanced at Frank Dixon, who was standing there with his arms crossed. his expression unreadable. "Why is he here?" Briggs sighed. "Because Frank is the head of the Veterans Day Planning Committee, and because he needed to hear the truth." Frank shifted uncomfortably. "Now wait a minute, Mr. Dixon," Chen interrupted, his voice sharp. "Captain Matthews is one of the most decorated special operations soldiers of her generation. Her record is classified at the highest levels, which is why you couldn't verify it. But I've read her file. I know what she's done, and right now she's the best asset we have." Frank looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time. There was doubt in his eyes still, but also something else, a crack in his certainty. Sarah turned back to Chen. "What do you need from me?" "Your assessment, your tactical read, and possibly your presence at the ceremony as additional security." She nodded slowly. "I'll do it." "Good," Briggs said. "We'll brief you fully tomorrow morning. For now, keep this quiet. We don't want to spook them." As the meeting broke up, Frank approached Sarah hesitantly. He looked uncomfortable, like a man being forced to swallow his pride. "Look," he said quietly, "maybe I was hasty the other night." Sarah met his eyes. "You called me a liar." "I didn't know, you didn't want to know," Sarah said. "Because I didn't fit what you thought a soldier should look like." Frank's face reddened. It's exactly that," Sarah said. She wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. "You assumed?" "You all assumed." She walked out before he could respond. But the damage was done. Word spread fast in a small town. By the next morning, half of Riverside had heard some version of the story. Sarah Matthews was working with the FBI. There was a threat. Maybe she wasn't lying after all, but the other half still doubted. At the grocery store, Sarah ran into Patricia Crane, a woman who'd been in her high school class. Patricia had been prom queen once. Now she was a real estate agent with too much makeup and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sarah," Patricia said, her voice saccharine, "I heard the most interesting rumor about you." "I'm sure you did," Sarah said, reaching for a box of cereal. "They're saying you're some kind of secret soldier. Special forces or something." Patricia laughed lightly. "I told everyone I went to school with Sarah. She was a B student who played softball. She's not exactly G.I. Jane." Sarah turned to face her. "People change, Patricia." "Oh, I'm sure you served," Patricia said quickly. "I'm not saying you didn't. But all this talk about hostage rescues and classified missions, I mean, come on. If you'd really done all that, why would you come back here? Why would a war hero end up back in Riverside, living in her dead father's house buying generic cereal?" The words stung because there was truth in them. Sarah had asked herself the same question 100 times. Why had she come back? Because she had nowhere else to go. Because the army had been her family, and when they cut her loose, she'd had no one. No husband, no kids, just a childhood home that smelled like dust and regret. "Maybe I like the quiet," Sarah said softly. Patricia's smile sharpened. "Or maybe the stories are just stories." Sarah paid for her groceries and left. That afternoon, she met with Colonel Briggs and Agent Chen in a secure room at the FBI field office in Pittsburgh, an hour's drive from Riverside. They showed her surveillance photos, communications intercepts. The extremist group called themselves the Patriot Vanguard, but there was nothing patriotic about them. They were angry men who'd twisted their love of country into hatred of their neighbors. "We believe they'll strike during the ceremony," Chen said. "Maximum casualties. Maximum media coverage." Sarah studied the photos. 3 men, young, radicalized online, armed with legally purchased weapons and homemade explosives. "The ceremony is in 4 days," she said. "You have locations on these men?" 2 of them. The third went dark yesterday. Sarah's tactical mind kicked into gear. "You need to lock down the perimeter. Limit access points. Screen everyone coming in." "That'll cause panic," Briggs said. "Better than body bags," Sarah replied. Chen nodded. "Agreed, we'll coordinate with local PD, but we need to keep this quiet until the last moment." "What about the town council?" Sarah asked. "Barrett and the others?" "They'll be briefed tomorrow," Chen said. "Whether they like it or not." Sarah allowed herself a small, bitter smile. Councilman Barrett, the man who'd called her stories exaggerations, was about to learn exactly how real her expertise was. The briefing happened the next morning at Town Hall. Sarah stood beside Agent Chen as he laid out the threat. The council members sat in stunned silence. Barrett's face had gone pale. "This is... You're certain?" We're certain, Chen said. And Captain Matthews will be assisting us. Barrett looked at Sarah. For a moment she thought he might apologize. But he didn't. Pride wouldn't let him. Fine, he said curtly. Do what you need to do. It wasn't respect. But it was a start. The next 3 days were a blur. Sarah worked with the FBI, with local police mapping out security protocols. She walked the ceremony site a dozen times, identifying vulnerabilities, suggesting improvements. Frank Dixon, to his credit, followed every recommendation without question. But the whispers continued. At the diner, at the gas station, in the church parking lot, was Sarah Matthews really a hero? Or was this all some elaborate bluff? And then, the morning of the Veterans Day ceremony, everything changed. Sarah was doing a final security sweep of the town square when her phone rang. Colonel Briggs, Sarah, he said, his voice tight. We have a situation. There's someone here who wants to see you. Someone from your past, Sarah's heart skipped. Who? You need to come to the VFW hall, now. She drove fast, her mind racing. When she walked into the hall, she froze. Standing next to Colonel Briggs was a woman Sarah hadn't seen in 4 years. She was older now, healthier. Her hair was longer, but Sarah would have recognized her anywhere. It was the woman from the compound, the hostage, the aid worker Sarah had carried through a hail of gunfire in the mountains of Afghanistan, the woman Sarah had saved. The woman's name was Dr. Elizabeth Chen, no relation to Agent Chen, just a coincidence. But there was nothing coincidental about her being here. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught in her throat. 4 years collapsed into nothing. She was back in that basement cutting chains, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears the moment she saw Sarah. Captain Matthews, she whispered. Then she crossed the room and wrapped Sarah in an embrace so fierce it drove the air from Sarah's lungs. Sarah stood rigid for a moment, overwhelmed. Then slowly, carefully, she returned the hug. Her hands shook. She hadn't let herself think about that mission in years. Hadn't let herself remember the weight of Elizabeth's frail body in her arms, the desperation in her voice, the blood on both of them as they ran. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, Elizabeth said, pulling back but keeping her hands on Sarah's shoulders. They told me your name once, years ago, but everything was classified. I tried to find you. I tried so many times. Sarah's voice came out rough. How are you here? Colonel Briggs stepped forward. I called her, Sarah, 2 days ago. Sarah turned to him, confused. Why? Because I've been hearing things, Briggs said, his voice hard with anger. I've been hearing that people in this town don't believe you, that they think you're making up stories, that they've been treating you like some kind of fraud. His jaw tightened. I won't stand for that. Not for one of my soldiers. Elizabeth looked between them, understanding dawning on her face. People don't believe her? Don't believe what she did? They think I exaggerated my service, Sarah said quietly. Because I'm a woman. Because the missions are classified. Because I don't fit their idea of what a hero looks like. Elizabeth's expression shifted from confusion to anger. You saved my life. You carried me 2 miles while people were shooting at you. You almost died for me. You don't need to. Yes, I do, Elizabeth said firmly. Colonel Briggs told me what's been happening. He told me about the town council, about the Veterans Day ceremony, about all of it. She took a breath. Sarah, I'm a professor now, at Georgetown. I teach international development and humanitarian work. I've testified before Congress. I've written 2 books about my experience, and in every single one, I talk about the soldier who saved me. I've been trying to honor you for years, even though I couldn't use your name. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she'd built to protect herself from the pain of being doubted, being dismissed. You didn't have to come here, Sarah said. Yes, Elizabeth said. I did. Agent Chen, the FBI agent, cleared his throat. I hate to interrupt, but we have a situation developing. Dr. Chen's presence here could actually help us. Sarah forced herself back into tactical mode. The ceremony. The ceremony, Agent Chen confirmed. It starts in 3 hours. We've identified 2 of the 3 suspects. They're in custody as of 1 hour ago, but the third is still in the wind and he's the most dangerous. Former military, dishonorably discharged, radicalized online. We have reason to believe he's already in Riverside. Sarah's mind sharpened. Description? White male, 32, 6 feet tall, brown hair. Name is Derek Howell. Explosives training from his time in the Army. He knows what he's doing. And you want me on site? Sarah said. I want you on site, Chen confirmed. Plain clothes. You'll have an earpiece and a direct line to our tactical team. You know how operators think. If he's there, you might spot him before we do. Sarah nodded. Then she looked at Elizabeth. You should stay here. Stay safe. No, Elizabeth said. I'm going to that ceremony. Elizabeth. Sarah, listen to me. Elizabeth's voice was calm but immovable. I came here to tell the truth about you. I came here to make sure everyone in this town knows what you did. If there's going to be a ceremony honoring veterans, then everyone there needs to hear about the veteran standing right in front of them. Colonel Briggs smiled slightly. Councilman Barrett is expecting her. I may have suggested that a Georgetown professor who was rescued by American forces might be a compelling speaker. Sarah almost laughed. Almost. You set this up. I set up an opportunity for the truth, Briggs said. What happens next is up to the people in this town. 2 hours later, Sarah stood at the edge of Riverside's town square, dressed in dark jeans, boots, and a jacket that concealed the earpiece and the sidearm Agent Chen had authorized her to carry. The square was filling up. Families with children, veterans in their old uniforms, medals pinned to their chests, the high school band warming up, local news cameras setting up. A stage had been erected at the north end of the square, draped in red, white, and blue bunting. Councilman Barrett stood near it, looking nervous. Frank Dixon was there too, in his Vietnam veteran's cap, scanning the crowd with new awareness. Sarah's earpiece crackled. All units in position, Agent Chen's voice said. Matthews, you have freedom to move. Eyes open. Copy, Sarah murmured. She began to walk the perimeter, her trained gaze sweeping faces, body language, hands, looking for the anomaly, the person who didn't fit. The ceremony began at 1400 hours. Barrett took the microphone first, his voice booming across the square. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this important day as we honor those who served our great nation. Sarah tuned him out. She was watching a man near the eastern edge of the crowd, 30s, alone, hands in his pockets, too still, too focused on the stage. Possible contact, east side, blue jacket, Sarah murmured into her mic. We see him, Chen replied. Stand by. The man pulled his hand from his pocket. Sarah tensed. It was a phone. Just a phone. He took a picture and moved on. Sarah exhaled slowly. Barrett was introducing the speakers. A Korean war vet, a Desert Storm sergeant. And then, we're honored to have with us Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a professor at Georgetown University and a humanitarian worker who experienced firsthand the bravery of America's service members in Afghanistan. Elizabeth walked onto the stage. She looked small up there, but her voice was steady when she took the microphone. Thank you for having me, she began. I'm not a veteran. I'm not a soldier. But I'm alive today because of a soldier, because of a woman who risked everything to save a stranger. The crowd was listening now, really listening. In 2019, I was kidnapped by terrorists while working on a humanitarian project in Afghanistan. I was held for 8 months. I was starved, beaten. I thought I was going to die in that place. Sarah's chest tightened. She kept scanning the crowd, but she could hear every word. And then one night I heard explosions, gunfire, shouting. I thought it was the end. But then the door to my cell opened, and there was an American soldier. A woman. She cut my chains. She told me I was safe. And then she carried me out of that compound while bullets flew around us. The crowd was silent now. She saved my life. And when I came home, when I tried to find her to thank her, I couldn't. The mission was classified. Her identity was protected. For years I've told this story without being able to name my hero. Elizabeth paused. Her eyes found Sarah in the crowd. But I can name her now. Her name is Captain Sarah Matthews, and she's standing right here in Riverside. She's your neighbor, your fellow citizen. And whether you know it or not, she's one of the bravest people I've ever met. Heads turned. People looked around, confused, searching. Frank Dixon stepped forward. He pointed directly at Sarah. "She's right there," Frank said loudly. "That's Captain Matthews." And suddenly every eye in the square was on Sarah. Her face flushed. She wasn't used to this. She'd spent her career in the shadows, unacknowledged, unnamed. But then something changed. One person started clapping. Then another. Then a dozen. Then 100. The applause rolled across the square like thunder. Sarah stood there overwhelmed as the town she'd thought had rejected her rose to its feet. And then her earpiece crackled urgently. "Matthews, we have him." Agent Chen's voice was sharp. Derek Howell just entered the square from the south entrance. Gray hoodie, backpack, he's moving toward the stage. Sarah's head snapped around. There, pushing through the applauding crowd, young, intense eyes, a backpack that hung too heavy. He was 30 feet from the stage, 25. His hand was moving toward the backpack zipper. Sarah ran. Sarah moved through the crowd like water, fast and fluid. Her eyes locked on the man in the gray hoodie. Training took over. Muscle memory from 1,000 drills, 100 real-world situations. The crowd was still applauding, still looking at where she'd been standing. They didn't see the threat. They didn't know. Derek Howell was 20 feet from the stage now. His hand was on the backpack zipper. His eyes were fixed on Elizabeth, on Barrett, on the veterans gathered near the podium. Sarah closed the distance. 15 feet. 10. She could hear Agent Chen in her earpiece shouting orders to his team, but they were positioned on the perimeter. They wouldn't reach him in time, it was just her. 5 feet. Derek's hand was inside the backpack now. Sarah lunged. She hit him from the side, a perfect tackle that drove them both to the ground. The backpack flew from his shoulder, skittering across the pavement. People screamed. The applause died instantly, replaced by confusion and panic. Derek was strong, trained. He twisted beneath her, throwing an elbow that caught Sarah's jaw. Pain exploded across her face, but she held on. Her knee, her bad knee, screamed in protest as she pinned him down. "Federal agent," she shouted, though it wasn't technically true. "Stay down." Derek bucked hard, trying to throw her off. His hand reached for something at his belt. A knife. Sarah saw the blade flash. She caught his wrist, slammed it against the pavement once, twice. The knife clattered away. "It's over," Sarah growled. "Don't make this worse. It's never over." Derek snarled, his face twisted with rage. "You people think you're heroes? You're murderers! You're—" Sarah drove her forearm into his throat, cutting off his air just enough to stop the words. "I said stay down." FBI tactical agents swarmed in, black-clad and armed. They pulled Derek away from Sarah, forcing him face down, zip-tying his hands behind his back. Agent Chen appeared at Sarah's side, helping her to her feet. "You okay?" Sarah's jaw throbbed where Derek had elbowed her. Her knee felt like it was on fire, but she nodded. "I'm fine." "The backpack, bomb squad's on it," Chen said. "You did good, Matthews. You just saved a lot of lives." Sarah looked around. The crowd had pulled back, creating a wide circle. Families clutched their children. Veterans stood in protective stances. Everyone was staring at her. And then Frank Dixon stepped forward. He walked right up to Sarah, his weathered face serious. For a moment she thought he might lecture her, might question what had just happened. Instead, he extended his hand. "I owe you an apology," Frank said, his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "A big one. I doubted you. I mocked you. I called you a liar when you were telling the truth the whole time." He paused, his jaw working. "You're a better soldier than I ever was. And I'm sorry." Sarah took his hand. His grip was firm, genuine. "Apology accepted," she said quietly. Frank nodded, then turned to the crowd. "You all hear that? Captain Matthews just stopped a terrorist attack right in front of us. She's the real deal. Everything she said was true." A woman Sarah didn't recognize called out, "We believe you." "Thank you." Others echoed it. "Thank you." God bless you. We're sorry. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. She'd been trained not to cry, trained to compartmentalize, to push emotion down and focus on the mission. But there was no mission now, just people, just her neighbors finally seeing her. Elizabeth came down from the stage, moving carefully through the crowd. When she reached Sarah, she took both of Sarah's hands in hers. Are you hurt? Elizabeth asked, examining Sarah's face where the bruise was already forming. I've had worse, Sarah said. Elizabeth laughed, a sound mixed with tears. I'm sure you have. Then her expression grew serious. Thank you. Again, you're still saving people. It's what I do, Sarah said simply. Councilman Barrett appeared, looking shaken. His pompous demeanor had evaporated. He looked smaller somehow, humbled. Captain Matthews, he said, I need to apologize publicly. What I said to you, what I implied. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. She could see the fear in his eyes. Fear that she'd humiliate him, expose him, make him pay for his dismissal of her. But she was tired of fighting. I accept your apology, Sarah said. But maybe next time believe people when they tell you who they are. Barrett nodded, shamefaced. Yes, absolutely. The bomb squad had cordoned off the backpack. Sarah watched as they used a robot to examine it, then carefully transported it to a containment vehicle. Agent Chen came back over. 4 pounds of homemade explosives, he said grimly, set with a dead man switch. If you hadn't stopped him when you did. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Colonel Briggs appeared, his face split with a rare smile. That's my soldier, he said, clapping Sarah on the shoulder. Always ready. Always, Sarah agreed. The ceremony resumed half an hour later, after the area was declared secure. But it was different now. The tone had shifted. When Barrett returned to the microphone, his voice was subdued. Ladies and gentlemen, what we just witnessed was heroism in action. Captain Sarah Matthews neutralized a threat and saved countless lives. She embodies everything this day is meant to honor. He gestured to Sarah. Captain, would you please join us on stage? Sarah hesitated. She'd never wanted the spotlight. But Elizabeth nodded encouragingly, and Frank gave her a gentle push forward. She climbed the steps to the stage, her knee protesting every movement. Barrett handed her the microphone. Sarah looked out at the sea of faces. Her hometown. People she'd grown up with. People who doubted her. People who were looking at her now with respect, with gratitude, with belief. I'm not good at speeches, Sarah began. Her voice echoed across the square. I'm a soldier. I do my job. I don't need thanks for it. She paused, gathering her thoughts, but I'll say this. Service isn't about glory. It's not about recognition or medals or having people believe your stories. It's about doing what's right when it's hard. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. It's about sacrifice. Her eyes found Elizabeth in the crowd. I've lost friends. I've been hurt. I've seen things I'll never be able to talk about. But I'd do it all again because that's what we do. That's what every veteran here has done. We serve, we sacrifice, and we don't quit. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. So today, don't just thank me. Thank every veteran here. Thank the men and women who gave up time with their families, who missed birthdays and holidays, who put themselves in danger so you could be safe. They're the real heroes. She handed the microphone back to Barrett. The applause started again, but this time it was different, deeper, more respectful. As Sarah stepped off the stage, veterans lined up to shake her hand. Young and old. Men and women, they knew. They understood. Frank Dixon waited at the bottom of the steps. We'd be honored if you'd speak at the VFW, he said. Anytime you want. As often as you want. I'd like that, Sarah said. Patricia Crane, the former prom queen who'd mocked her at the grocery store, approached hesitantly. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I said terrible things. I didn't know. You could have asked, Sarah said, not unkindly. Instead of assuming, Patricia nodded, tears in her eyes. You're right. I'm sorry. Sarah accepted the apology and moved on. That evening, after the ceremony ended, after the FBI finished their interviews, after the news crews finally left, Sarah sat on her father's old porch with Elizabeth beside her. The sun was setting over Riverside, painting the sky orange and pink. What will you do now? Elizabeth asked. Sarah considered the question. A week ago, she would have said she didn't know, that she was lost, that she didn't belong here, but something had shifted. I think I'll stay, Sarah said. This is my home. These are my people. Maybe I can do some good here, Elizabeth smiled. I think you already have. They sat in comfortable silence watching the light fade. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Frank Dixon. VFW meeting Thursday. We want you there, please. Another from Agent Chen. FBI is considering you for a consultant position. Interested? Another from Colonel Briggs. Proud of you, Captain. Always have been. Sarah smiled. For 20 years she'd fought in shadows, unnamed and unrecognized. She'd saved lives that would never know her name. She'd bled for a country that didn't always remember she existed. But today, in a small town square in Pennsylvania, the shadows had lifted. Today, people believed her. Not because she'd demanded it. Not because she'd proven herself with words, but because when it mattered most, she'd done what she always did. She'd stood up. She'd fought. She'd protected the innocent. She'd been a hero, and finally, everyone could see it. Sarah Matthews leaned back in her chair, her bad knee stretched out, her bruised jaw aching, her heart full. She was home, and she was exactly where she needed to be.